welcome to this week's episode of Not D&D, brought to you by EN World. As always, I am your host, Jessica, and joining me, they have crawled out of the brilliant ruins in which they live. I have Justin and Rachel here. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks.
Thanks for having us.
Of course. So why don't you introduce yourselves a little bit more fully and your involvement in the game? Justin, why don't we start with you?
Sure thing. I'm Justin. I'm Chief Creative Officer here at Studio Hermitage. I have come from a background of tabletop role-playing games. I started out working on World of Darkness titles at White Wolf Game Studio way back in the day, like in 1995, and was with that all the way through the development of the MMO. And I was even at Paradox Interactive for a while, just a couple years ago, and actually took my leave there to come work on Our Brilliant Ruin, to come do a new project.
Wonderful, fantastic. And Rachel, about yourself?
Hi, yeah, I'm Rachel J. Wilkinson, and I'm the senior writer-designer at Studio Hermitage. I got into this by freelance writing for World of Darkness. So we've got two World of Darkness folks here today. And I was a vampire writer, started out as a vampire writer, went on to Scion. I also am now the line editor and writer for Dune, Adventures of the Imperium. I almost forgot the name of it. What is wrong with me? But now we're working on Our Brilliant Ruin.
Fantastic. That's great. I also love World of Darkness. It was actually the first role-playing game I ever played. Well, it was a bit of a hack of it because it was for a zombie setting, but the core of those mechanics, I'm a big fan of that as well. And of course, I can see the echoes of that game in Our Brilliant Ruin in some elements of it, which we'll come and talk about in a bit. But before
no one at all.
Well, I mean, why not? It's a great core. But anyway, before we dig into Our Brilliant Ruin, I'd love to talk about you both a little bit, if that's okay, because I always dig into guests' backgrounds and history of games. So I'm curious as to what your first game was and how you got to where you are now. But Rachel, I don't know, do you remember your first ever game you played?
In my entire life, it was Candyland. We want to start way back when. But as far as tabletop, it was Vampire the Masquerade. I was a teen whose boyfriend took her to a vampire game. Yes, he was running it, so it was very special.
Fantastic. No, I love that. That's wonderful. And I'm sure you're not alone in that experience. But obviously since then you've gone on to have a career in games. And how did that happen? So if someone's aspiring to get into games and do the sort of things you're doing, what was your journey?
I started with a 3,000 word project for 3 cents a word. I started from the very bottom of, I begged a friend for an opportunity to write. And thankfully she gave it to me. And and then it was from then on, I just started taking on more and more freelance work. And it's just a matter of keeping at it, meeting deadlines. I say that's always the most important thing. If you can meet a deadline, your writing almost doesn't matter. So I know Justin would sort of disagree with that, but it's true. If you could do it, there's enough people to kind of clean up the mess along the way. So.
As someone who works in publishing, I've got to say the biggest thing is when somebody hands something in on time and it's to the brief. That's a rare thing, which sounds like such a basic thing, but actually it's a big deal. So I would agree with you, Rachel. Yeah.
So that's I got involved. Like I said, very, very entry level kind of writing. My very first thing, I think I rewrote The Brood. That was the assignment on Vampire the Requiem. And now, and then I just moved up the ranks and have been working with different publishers and different companies and eventually landed at the best place, Studio Hermitage.
Of course. I guess that leads us over to Justin. So I'm gonna ask you the same questions, Justin. Do you remember your first tabletop role-playing game?
Yeah, I think it's probably pretty similar for a lot of people my age. I literally played Dungeons and Dragons in my cousin's basement.
Classic.
There was a yes poster on the wall, and everyone had long hair. Yeah,
cool.
It was very Stranger Days or Stranger Things, right?
Yeah.
But I played when I was 7, 8, 9, something like that. And then kept with it throughout elementary school and fell out of it a little bit in junior high and high school, but then got back into it when a woman I was dating
It's always the significant others, right?
Yeah, they draw you in. Yeah.
Well, there's this game where you can play vampires and werewolves because we were both big Anne Rice fans. I'm like, oh, I know what those are. Yeah, it's like being an elf, except you're a vampire. And so then never looked back.
Fantastic. That's great. Well, thanks so much for sharing that kind of background with us. And as we mentioned, a lot of vampire-y things. So the moody, dramatic horror is kind of what you guys are comfortable with. But let's talk about our brilliant ruin, segue into that. So could one of you give us an overview? So if somebody's not heard of our brilliant ruin, how would you introduce it to them? Like the pitch, as it were.
I'll give you the super tiny one. And it's Downton Abbey with monsters. Rachel has a more erudite answer.
Okay, that's a pretty good short.
Yeah, that was pretty good. No, so it is a Gilded Age where you can role play. What was it? An existential and sociological drama.
Okay.
Yes, it was very fancy that I have now since forgotten. But yes, because Downton Abbey with monsters is so much easier.
I understand it though when you say that. Yeah.
Sociological drama with existential horror, kind of.
That's what it is. Thank you, Justin. Yeah.
Wonderful. I love that. I love the artwork in the game, which we'll dig into in a bit. But I love the idea of there's different factions, and it plays with like status and your position in society and things. So yeah, let's talk about kind of the setting and the factions within that. So it's called, is it Dramark? Am I pronouncing that right?
There is no correct pronunciation. That's one of the things I love about games like this, is that because there is so much societal influence, just like in Vampire, is it the Camarilla or the Camarilla? For here, some of us say Dramark, some say Dramark, and however you say it, I like that it kind of indicates, oh, well, maybe they're from a region that suggests that's how it's said there. So say it how you like.
Okay, so tell me about the Dramark and what this world is.
So the Dramark, or the Dramark, is literally all that's left of this world that our brilliant ruin takes place in. 150-ish years ago, there was light from a distant dead star that made its way to this planet, and unfortunately, this light was on, I guess, a different spectrum, or in some sort of sense, acted malignantly upon the world. So it changed the way it refracted strangely in the water. It made the seas poisonous. It corrodes everything it touches on this planet. It turns people into monsters. And so literally the world is shrinking, and the Dramark is all that's left. And then, of course, in some contexts, some of the stuff that was left has now turned actively hostile to you. But in the background of all this, there was a previous royal society and a kind of feudal holdover, and that all fell apart because they were eaten up by the ruin. Effectively, they became the first vampires, and then in their place there was a power vacuum, and well, some crummy new aristocrats have kind of stepped into the power vacuum there and said, oh, we will uphold this. And of course, they have all the money, they have all the resources, they have all the glamour, the glitz, the power. So that's one faction at play in the world. One of the other factions is the true folk. They're the ones who have jobs. They're the ones who have skills. They're the ones who do things. Basically, the world keeps running because they keep it going. And then the third faction is the unbonded. And this is sort of a catch-all of people who find themselves outside the prevailing social order. So this is everyone from people who say, the heck with this, I'm going to go run off in the woods and start my own homestead, to people who have been thrown out of the true folk guilds, or people who are actively choosing a life of quote unquote crime. We don't have laws or government in this world. Those were one of the casualties, but there are certainly people who want to operate outside the social order, and they form things like syndicates.
Fantastic. And we are playing people in one of these factions in the game?
Yes.
Fantastic. Well, Rachel, what was some of the inspirations behind the games for creating this world and those different factions? We've already mentioned Downton Abbey, but were there any others?
That's very much the time period. That's very much the style. It's very much the aesthetic. It's the idea of, we are not in this world. We are not on Earth. We are on an Earth-like planet. We wanted to get away from, Earth's problems, Earth's expectations, Earth's history. We wanted to be able to start fresh in a lot of ways, but we like old English manners, and we like, 1920 styles and things. So we're bringing a lot of aesthetics from that time period. So that's where you really get kind of the Downton Abbey aspect. You also get the Downton Abbey aspect with the idea that the story is about the property. It's about the house. It is about the maintenance of it and the family who resides in there. So you have a lot of that kind of influence, especially in the aristocrat and that faction.
Mhm.
But there's also obviously a lot of World of Darkness in here. There's the ability to be part of factions and families and guilds. You can create an identity that you want to play in. That is, it's not like a 1-for-1. I don't want anybody to think like suddenly you can play a clan in this game. That is not.
Sure.
Yeah, that is not what this is. But it's the idea of saying like you have a group that you can belong to, and that you can RP with, and that you can, I don't know, pursue agendas for and against. I would also say influences are very much Gothic literature. Jane Austen, Jane Eyre, the Bronte sisters, like all of that, very much a Gothic literature bent. So you have these manors. They are old and they are crumbling. The monsters are vampires and ghosts and some more of these traditional antagonists, I guess you would call them. So yeah, and so I think that's probably, for me, I think those are the big influences. And then it was doing all the things that were interesting, within kind of those parameters.
Fantastic. And I feel, I said before we started recording to you both, it's a very pretty game. Like the book, as an object, the artwork is very beautiful. Justin, could you talk about the art direction and how that, what choices you made to kind of lean into that setting and the vibe that you created?
Yeah, you bet. That's one of the things I'm most proud of. When we first started working on the project, we brought on Andy Foltz, who I'd worked with in the past at Ubisoft Red Storm, and Ephraim Palacios, who we hadn't worked with directly, but he had done some art for World of Darkness as well, in addition to Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, things along those lines. And in establishing that we wanted kind of that Downton Abbey aesthetic happening, we focused on the art of artists like J.C. Leyendecker, who did a lot of advertising and magazine covers around the turn of the century there and into the Edwardian period, and even up, I think, until the 50s. But has like a very strong kind of realistic style, but the realism is accomplished through light and paint strokes there. So you can see we have a lot of very bold paint strokes, and everyone, like, one of the core tenets of the world is literally it's cool to look cool. So the focus for the artists was everybody looks tremendous. They don't have to be beautiful necessarily, but their look has to tell a story. And so Ephraim just jumped in with both feet under Andy's art direction there. And I agree. If it doesn't sound too vain to say, I love the look of this book too. Like, I am so proud of how this came out. It is just beautiful. I guess I could say that because it's not my work, right? So
yeah. Absolutely. And I think it really does invite you in and does the visual storytelling of everything you've just described the setting to be very much so. So I think it leans into it well. So you can have a look through some of the pictures and you get the sort of game and the sort of stories you're going to be telling for sure. But speaking of playing the game, let's dig into the mechanics a little bit. So we have, I love a dice pool system. So I was very excited to see that there. But Rachel, could you talk about what the core mechanic of the game is?
Well, I got to give you a little bit of context, because one of the things that we wanted to play around with was the idea of passion and emotion. And one of my perspectives on creating the dice system was, if everybody is a human, then physicality, in the sense of your strength, your dexterity, your stamina, these things didn't have as much meaning, because most people, like, you can get on these like strongest man in the world and frailest person in the world, you can do that, but for the most part this wasn't really about using your physical prowess to conquer the world around you somehow, or fix the problems around you, or something like it just wasn't compatible. So having this idea of why you did something instead, your motivation, your personality. So we switched from the idea of having stats in like I said, dex, stamina, strength, resolve, some of those typical ones. We decided to focus on what might motivate somebody, what in their personality might give them the reason to do the thing that they're doing. Why are they pursuing the agenda that they're pursuing? So we have things like audacity and cunning, and it is the idea of why you're doing it instead of what. And it also gives a lot of flexibility, because one of the things that you do to create your dice system is you pair a personality with a skill. So I'm trying to think of like a good example of like why you would do something for two different reasons. So if you are going to crash a party, let's say crash a party in an estate, and so maybe you are trying to talk your way in. Let's just say express, right? This is the skill you're going to use. So you can just say, I want to go to this party because I want to be seen with the people. Maybe that's audacity plus express. And I'm going to be like, I walk up to the person, whoever's guarding the door, and saying, I belong here. Look at me. I'm amazing. Here's all the things that I bring to this party. This is why you want to let me in. But you might also be playing maybe a slightly more true folk perspective that is working out of loyalty. Maybe the person that you are the lady's maid for has forgotten some sort of important gift or something for the hostess for the party. So now you're talking in a different way. You're using the loyalty and express to sort of talk your way into saying, oh, I'm doing this for a particular reason. So it gives a player a lot of opportunity to really tailor why they're doing something and tailor it to their personality, rather than saying, okay, I have to do a perception check. A perception check is going to be this plus this. So you can ask, well, why are you looking around, or what are you interested in? What is motivating you to do this? And they can also lean in then to their top skills. Like we're not trying to do this thing where it's like, oh, we want you to use these skills you don't have any ability in. That's just sort of built for players. Players are always going to try to go for their biggest pool. Like there's no way around that. So we're just trying to open up the narrative aspect of it to give people options.
That sounds great. So it's really about the how and not the what is a big focus.
The why. I would say like the why. It's like really, why are you doing this? And whether you succeed or don't succeed, we try to avoid using the word fail, because even not succeeding allows you to have an interesting outcome. So is perhaps you had one thing that you wanted to do, or you thought there was going to be this sort of outcome, and maybe that's how you would quantify success. But even if you don't necessarily roll your success, another outcome could have just as much of an interesting development.
Absolutely. So with that in mind, I'll bring us back to our kind of thing. Maybe Justin, I'll tag you in at this point. So what is the core kind of mechanic? If we sit down to play, I know I'm going to get to throw a lot of dice down because it's a dice pool. We all love doing that. But how does that actually work?
Yeah, when a situation comes up and you want to test for success or failure, the player proposes the dice pool they want to use. So they'll take a personality trait plus a skill, and that number overall will generate how many dice you're rolling there. And as Rachel said, if we assume players gravitate toward power, okay, cool, right? Like let's say I've put a 3 in cunning because I want to play a cunning character. I can always use cunning, right? Because I'm proposing the dice pool. And so in that way, the results of my character's actions become cunning because I describe them in a cunning way. And so the character then is cunning in the course of the saga. But anyway, I take that dice pool there and I roll those dice, and I'm looking for 6s. I'm looking for brills. And if I get more brills than 1s, if I get more brills than glooms, I have achieved success. And if I get 3 brills, that's a triumph. It's great. I succeed above and beyond. And if I get more glooms than brills, then it's a catastrophe. Something awful happens, right? Your traditional crit fail or botch there. But statistically, the way it works out is you are almost as likely to fail as to succeed, because it's just I want a 6 and I want more 6s than 1s. And so what we're trying to do here is push you into the passions system. So you can invoke your passion, which gives you extra dice. and also increases your success threshold. So 6s and 5s become rules there. But I can't, or the more I use passion, eventually it will overflow. I will become governed by my passions, and I will become overwrought, which means I'm rolling a bunch of extra dice that can only yield glooms. So eventually I'm going to become so overwrought by passion that it's going to provide my undoing. And so that's the dice system. Another way to accomplish things is to use your portfolio. And these they're not really spells because they're not magical, but they just have an effect in the world, right?
Okay.
And so, like as an aristocrat, I may have a portfolio that emphasizes wealth. I can just throw money at my problems, right?
Yeah.
Or I may have a great entourage with me, so I can just send my people to do that. Or I may invoke access, right? Instead of having to talk my way through the door, of course I'm on the guest list. So I would just mark an access, and then into the party I go.
Beautiful. I love that. So we've been speaking a little bit about characters and the intent, but what sort of characters and people are we going to be playing in the world? Like, Rachel, do you have some examples of people that we could play in the world?
Well, sure. You would get to choose your faction first, which is playing an aristocrat. This is sort of the new folks who have taken over. They are probably the most moneyed in general. They own most of the property. They saw a power vacuum and decided to fill it with themselves.
Sure.
And so you can play part of 5 different families. There are Galdaparks, Daras, Valgreaves, Astus Willow, and the Belafines. And each one sort of has a thing that they like to do, or a thing that kind of, you want to be able to pick them out of a crowd. You can, when you're looking around, you're like, oh, that's a Galdapark, that's a Belafine. I can tell by the way they look, the way they act, the things that they're interested in. And each one of the aristocratic families does have a bit of an agenda that adds some cohesion to the group. Okay. And then you have the true folk. And these are, you might consider your working class people, your middle class people. These are folks who have traded a little bit of autonomy away for comfort. So the idea that the world is encroaching around you and you are having to kind of maintain your survival. Well, the true folk guilds, and these are set up as different sort of service industries, I guess is the best way to put it. There's an academic one. There is a literal service one. The League of Glove and Key are sort of the servants in the household and service staff and other things like hotels and that sort of thing. And then we also have the Rivet and Bellows, which are your tradesmen. These are your plumbers and your welders. And we also have Peacock's Feast, which is artists. And we also have Piedmont Accord, which are generally I just call them our freelancers. They sort of do it. We need a job done. We need this person to do it. And they become journalists. They become PIs. They become, they're sort of I would almost call them as plot chasers. That's just like, if you want to plot chase at your game, go be a Piedmont, you'll be good. So what they've done, though, is that they have made these contracts and have become bonded with a guild. The guild sort of vouches for them, and the guild also establishes these contracts between the true folk and the aristocrats. So the aristocrats almost act in a way like patrons. It's not exactly like patrons, but it's an easy shorthand. So if you are working in the downstairs of a house, it is the obligation of that aristocratic family to feed you, clothe you, keep you protected from ruin, right? And so you as a true folk have agreed, okay, I don't want to deal with the outside world, or I don't want to have to deal with those day-to-day survival problems. So I think, I find this to be very cushy. And one of the things that we're focused on, especially with that dynamic between the aristocrats and the true folk, was being able to give the true folk power the other direction too, and being able to define the terms of the contract and making it more of an agreement where the aristocrats have to rely on these people. And so if they decide, oh, we're going to have a work stoppage, it's a powerful
problem
to do. Yes. And then you have the unbonded, which is pretty much anyone that wants to live outside that system for whatever reason. Perhaps it is for a bit of transgressive behavior. Perhaps it is a bit because they are a fallen aristocrat. Maybe they are a former royal in hiding from back in the Sovereign era. Perhaps they were once a siliconetic engineer. We haven't talked about siliconetics yet, but that's also one of these. So we have these kind of, I don't want to, maybe perhaps they're classes of people or former classes or historical professions, maybe we could call them, that have definitely fallen out of favor because people believe that they are in the state that they're in because of these yahoos back there. You know, like these guys put us where we are now, and so they have a lot of they have more difficulty kind of making their way in society.
Okay. And when you're creating a character, you obviously choose these factions and things, and as you mentioned, you've got those kind of different personality and skills, things you'd create. But when because it's a collaborative game, we're playing together, is it good to have people from different factions or the same one? Like, how would we build a good party to sit down and play a game together?
Yeah, this really falls on the players to decide their relationships with one another. For groups that like a lot of conflict, a lot of that upstairs, downstairs tension, a lot of that dynamism among the players and characters, absolutely choose people from different factions and different backgrounds and different sub factions within. It's great to have one player's character ostensibly controlling all the money and you all work for me, when of course the power dynamic doesn't actually work that way, right? It's whatever people are doing at the table kind of gives it greater context there. But we've seen some people who, particularly at Gen Con this year, a lot of people have sympathized with the unbonded over the aristocrats, because the aristocrats have their power unjustly, and in many cases the unbonded want to throw that power down. And so this makes for a very interesting dynamic of, you're the aristocrat who owns the house that's throwing the party, and I'm the unbonded scoundrel who's nonetheless really good at cards and got invited to the party somehow. So now, and I fell in with you that way. And so those circumstances make for great tensions, make for great sub-stories there. Absolutely, you can all be of the same faction, right? We can have different people over for a hunting weekend and everyone's an aristocrat in the player group. Or we can have the mixed groups that are focused on, getting stuff done in general, or things happen to them and we see where it takes them.
Beautiful. And obviously as a player that would have a different vibe, like you say, and experience depending on what you want, but it must feel different for someone running the game depending whether everyone's in different factions. Do you have any advice for GMs for running a game and a story where there is that potentially inter-party conflict or differing agendas, perhaps, shall we say?
I think top level for me, my big two are, number one, manage that expectation from the get-go. If I come to the table expecting a bunch of backstabbing among one another, and Rachel doesn't want that, wants more of like a PvE, we're going to solve the mystery kind of thing. We need to work that out up front, right? Everyone needs to be on the same page. My second piece of advice is typically for game masters, and don't script the story is typically what I say. Instead, come up with a situation. Apologies, lawnmower right there. Come up with a situation and then see how the player's characters respond to it, as opposed to expecting, okay, then they'll fight this guy, then they'll find this clue, then this will happen. You're not blocking out a play. You're not scripting a story. Instead, you're kind of proposing a scenario and then seeing how improvisationally the players respond to it.
That's some great advice. I like that. Thank you. Another thing I want to bring out, because we talked about character creation, but I also noticed there is a sheet for developing your own estate. Rachel, could you talk a little bit about how estates work and what parts of that play in the game?
Yeah, so estates are important because of the Downton Abbey aspect. We have estates in this game really as characters unto themselves. They also act as a unifying mechanic for, just like we were talking about, diverse groups. So we can talk about why perhaps an aristocrat, a true folk, and an unbonded are all interested in this particular property and why they might be working together. So if you want to get away from more of the backstabbiness or trying to figure out how these agendas are working against each other, your property sheet, your community property, that is a great avenue to go into that. Yeah. And finding out a way, what investment do you have in this property and what environmental factors are then endangering it, right? So then you can kind of work together that way. But property is really so that you have the ability to build wealth, make discoveries, be able to restore your own health, throw parties. Like, all of this is for your ability to be able to sort of present your own view of what this world should be. It allows you to build up property. It allows you to become a player in the larger social dynamic of the game. And yeah, and it's also a way to be reminded of ruin, because it is called Our Brilliant Ruin for a reason.
Yeah.
And we do have this environmental antagonist. It's the best way to put it. It's this environmental antagonist always trying to put pressure on you. And I think that's really important, because the idea, when we were talking about passion, we're talking about emotion, we're really trying to tap into, it's the end of the world. And while you don't necessarily have to play the end of the world as tomorrow, you do want to feel the pressure of what that means. And the ruin, it allows us to do that in such a way as that the ruin can build up on your property, and it can start to cling to your possessions. And you can start to feel that as something that you have to kind of be guarding against, or cleaning up, or having something that you're having to deal with kind of all the time that is related to that. And that community property aspect helps with that. And it also allows you to be able to have NPCs that you rely on and maybe go to and keep track of. They have, if you're looking at the character sheet or the property sheet, you can see there's estate features and there's events that you can have. So you can make notes about what has gone on in this estate. So also to keep track of, what's happened in your saga or your venture.
Great. So there's a group responsibility for taking notes, because it doesn't fall to one person, because I think every campaign has that poor person that's expected to keep track of what's going on. So this is a group effort. So
and if I can also add in there too, I mean, speaking of group effort, the whole point of having community property was also, again, to tie in these disparate kind of factions and disparate kind of point of views that everyone at the table has to decide how you're going to spend your enhancement points. It's a group discussion in the end, and everybody has agency in that decision.
Fantastic. Another thing I wanted to ask about, you mentioned briefly before, Rachel, you said a siliconet we hadn't talked about.
Siliconetic, yes.
Siliconetics.
Okay, so siliconetics are artifacts of the previous era, is the best way to put it. It is the idea that so we have the Sovereign Era, and the Sovereign Era is the last, what we would consider maybe like a typical human era before the dead starlight started to appear and kind of corrupt and corrode things around it. So the Siliconetic were built as machines that were going to make life easier for everyone. They are just sort of logic-based machines. It's not digital. It's very gears and levers and things like that. But the idea was that these things were monstrous in and of themselves. So you would, and they would serve some sort of function. So maybe you would have we have one that's like a lighthouse that will desalinate water and make prescription drugs and but they will just sort of spit out whatever it wants. And at a time, it may have worked properly. And of course, instead of giving people more free time, it just meant that more people didn't have jobs anymore. And so this is also kind of a wink, wink, nudge, nudge reflection of what is going on today. But the idea then is that 200 years have passed, and now these things are breaking down. And so what they decide to do, what they decide to make, what they decide to, consume, that is nobody knows what they're making decisions on anymore. And so that is another kind of environmental factor. And it's another opportunity to get away from really role playing in the States, particularly, or being focused on the States and trying to do something that is a bit more adventuresome and a little bit more, mystery solving.
Yeah. I really like the idea of that, because I can already think of some awful things because it kind of sounds like, and like, how computer programs will find the easiest way. And if you don't put the right parameters in, it can have disastrous effects. It's like if you say to a computer program, as long as no one has this disease anymore, you're successful. It's like, well, if we kill the people, they're not diseased anymore, I guess. So that works.
Right.
So things like that, unintended consequences. I like that. That's super interesting. So if people are listening to this and they're like, hey, this sounds super interesting, I'd love to get a copy, where can they pick up a copy of the game? Where's the best place to go?
Drive-through RPG.
Mhm.
That is the best place to go. The entire core rulebook is free to anybody for anybody to download. You know, download it, take a look at it, tell us what you think.
And will always be free. It's not a promotion. The game is free. Please just go have it.
Amazing. Wow. Fantastic. Well, you can't really, definitely take a look at that.
We did a crowdfund a little while back, and so we've got some physical copies coming out as well. In the coming months, those will be available at Amazon, but we're also doing some small scale providing books to individual retailers. If your individual retailer wants to pick some up, get in touch with us. We will figure something out. But if you want a hard copy of the book, Amazon will soon be your probable first stop.
Fantastic. And we've pre-recorded this today, so if anyone has any questions that they want to ask about the game or get some more information, is there a good place they can go online to ask? Is it the website for that, or Twitter, or?
Social media will work. We also have a Discord, so we would absolutely encourage you to join our Discord. If you go to the website, there will be links to be able to do that. And the Discord is definitely the most direct link to getting to us directly. Social media, we have folks that are monitoring that and responding to it, but that's Justin and I are not particularly social media savvy, so
fair enough. But Discord could be the place on the website.
Yeah,
I love that. That's fantastic. And what other projects and things have you got going on that people can look out for?
So as we started Studio Hermitage, the idea was to treat this as a full transmedia studio, and I know that's a bit of a buzzword, but we're genuinely doing it that way. We want to tell different stories across different media, and in most cases make those interactive, right? So that's why we started with the TTRPG. So that's our first game that's out. We're also working on a comic book that will be coming out around the first of the year. We're doing that with Dark Horse Studios. That's going to be a 3-book series. So that will be available. But also in the short term.
Yes, I'm making an audio drama. Yes, so it is more than an audiobook. This is more TV for your car. This is actually fully dramatized with over 20 voices. We have some celebrities on there like Kate Siegel and Dira Varma, Byron Mann. Look them up. You will recognize their faces. It is from a lot of our genre things on Netflix, Midnight Mass, Hill House, Bly Manor. And Dira Varma, you will know from Game of Thrones, Rome, if you're part of the Wayback Machine, and I'm there too, Justin. I'm there too. And then Byron Mann was in The Expanse and Street Fighter. So so you'll recognize these folks. And then we also used a lot of local talent to meet here in Texas. Houston has a very vibrant theater community and a number of professional theaters. In fact, I think they have the most theater seats, second to New York here.
Wow.
And so it's New York, Chicago, Houston, which is straight. You don't even think Houston.
I didn't know that.
No, it's
a bit of trivia for
fact. So we have a ton of professional Equity Houston actors, and so we were able to get into the studio and they lent their talents to the story. So this is a story about a true folk academic, part of Crown Hall College, who gets involved with the Valgrave aristocratic family and their problems and the secrets that are going on there.
Beautiful. And Clawmore Heights is the name of it. Is that right?
Clawmore Heights, yes. And the trailer is out now. I encourage you to go to YouTube. Absolutely go to YouTube and check out the trailer. It has incredible art from Evan McKenzie, and Ephraim Palacios. We did kind of a visual trailer for it. And then you'll also be able to listen to the episodes on YouTube and also wherever you get your podcasts.
That sounds great. I love that because people might be listening to a podcast right now. So they do that.
Imagine that, yes.
Imagine that. Plug in a podcast and another podcast.
Clawmore Heights and hit subscribe.
That's good. If you're listening to the podcast, the links to everything are in the show notes, so you can just click through. So don't worry about writing it down or remembering. You can just click through on there. And if you're watching the video, it's in the show notes, in the comment section, and also it's been up on the screen. Well, I think we're coming up to the end of our time talking about our brilliant ruin. Is there anything anything you want to closing on, or is there something you didn't get the chance to brag about that I didn't ask you about? Justin, I don't know. Is there anything we haven't covered?
We want people, again, to tell their stories and to do as much as they possibly can with this. So one of the things that we also have is a community use license. So if you want to make your own supplements, if you want to do your own streams, if you want to tell your own stories, go to the ourbrilliantruin.com website, and it's down there on the legal side at the bottom. And so you'll be able to make your own supplements and distribute those on DriveThruRPG as well. We have a series of those out currently called The Whisper. The Whisper is a sort of in-world magazine, sort of a gossip rag, something like the Tatler. And you never know when the Whisperer might be listening. And so these are kind of selected vignettes from the full run of the Whisper. And we plan to continue doing those.
Beautiful. So very Lady Whistledown. Love that. And Rachel, I don't know about you. Is there any kind of closing words or anything we didn't get the chance to talk about Our Brilliant Ruin?
No, except it's cool to look cool. And I just wanted to reaffirm that, because, you have so many games where you have to start in a potato sack and work your way up. And one of the things that we're really encouraging with this game is if you want to have all the things, have all the things. Like start out in a fun place that makes you the most fabulous person at the party.
Having the things isn't going to solve your problems.
No, it is not.
But you can look good whilst you're doing it.
You can look good while it's happening, yes.
Yeah, which sometimes that's the only win you can get that day. So take it if you can. All right, that's wonderful. Thank you so much. Before you go, I am going to ask you the question I ask all guests, and that's if you have any recommendations for any other tabletop RPGs. And the rules to this question is it can't be a game that you've made, and of course it can't be D&D. Justin, do you have a game?
Well, if it can't be D&D and I can cheat on an OSR title, I will recommend Outcast Silver Raiders, which is very kind of grimy, lo-fi, not actually D&D, but really D&D. If I can't use that one, I would love to recommend Vaesen by Free League. Which is kind of a 19th century Swedish monster mystery solving. There's some commonalities with OBR. In fact, you get the castle Gillenkreutz there, so there's a similar idea of building out your estate. But overall, it's very moody. It's got great art. We took a lot of inspiration from them, and so that's one of my favorites.
I love that. Passing over to you, Rachel. Same question.
Yeah, well, for me, it's going to be Chaosium's Call of Cthulhu for sure. And if they would like me to work on it, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But I have not yet. No, but I think it also pairs well with Our Brilliant Ruin. It has a bit more of so we have we chose not to get involved in religion and occultism and magic. We specifically made this a class conflict. And so I think what Call of Cthulhu does is allow you to get into the elder gods and starts to get into the way that the cosmic horror can affect you. So it's a nice pairing, I think.
Wonderful. Yeah. So if you want to throw some tentacles into your cosmic horror, Cthulhu all the way. That's some great recommendations. Justin, Rachel, and giving it your time to talk to me about Our Brilliant Ruin. Congratulations on the crowdfunding success. It's great to see. And I hope people have enjoyed listening to this conversation and go download it, because you can get the PDF for free on DriveThruRPG. So why not? But I think that's all for this week. So thank you very much for everyone that watched and listened. But we're going to head off now. Thanks very much. Bye.
Thank you.